My name is Claire Adams. I'm 27 years old, and just last week I graduated from Stanford with my MBA. You'd think that would make me the favorite child, right? Wrong. In my family, I've always been the one who fades into the background, the invisible daughter, the practical one who pays the bills and handles the responsibilities no one else wants to touch. My sister Ashley? She's the star, the future doctor, the pride of our family, and me? I'm just the girl who makes sure the lights stay on. For years, I told myself that if I just worked harder, achieved more, did better, they'd finally see me. They'd finally be proud. But deep down, I always knew the truth. I was never going to be enough. What I didn't know was that the night meant to celebrate my biggest achievement would become the night my parents said something so cruel it would shatter our family forever. Have you ever heard words so vicious you wished you could unhear them? Especially on a day that was supposed to lift you up? If this resonates with you, maybe my story will help you find your own worth too. We gathered at Delmonico's, one of the most elegant restaurants in Seattle. White tablecloths, golden chandeliers, the soft murmur of wealth all around us. I had booked the private room myself, paid for every meal, every bottle of wine, every last detail. It wasn't about showing off. After years of side jobs and student loans and relentless grinding, I just wanted one evening to celebrate something I had actually earned. I greeted each guest with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. My professors were there, my colleagues, my supervisor from the consulting firm where I'd just secured a full-time position, classmates who actually seemed proud of me, and then my parents arrived, Susan and Robert Adams, perfectly dressed, perfectly composed, like the celebration was theirs instead of mine. They didn't bring flowers, not even a card, just themselves. Ashley wasn't there either. She was supposedly working a hospital shift, but I suspected she just didn't feel like coming to an event that wasn't about her. I made the introductions, watched my parents shake hands and exchange polite smiles. The compliments started flowing, the kind I'd secretly hoped they'd hear one day. One of my professors smiled at my mother. "You must be incredibly proud of Claire," he said warmly. "A Stanford MBA is no easy accomplishment." My mother gave a small, airy laugh. "Oh, we're proud of both our girls," she said. "But Ashley, our youngest, she's in med school now, pulling long hours in the ER, saving lives. That's what truly matters." Silence. You could hear the cutlery pause mid-air. My smile stayed fixed on my face, rigid, practiced, like it had been nailed there just to survive the moment. A few minutes later, my manager stood up to give a toast. He talked about my determination, how I'd guided our intern team, kept everything running when deadlines loomed. "Claire is one of the most capable young consultants I've ever worked with," he said proudly. "She's going to do great things." The applause that followed was warm, genuine. I turned to my parents, hoping for even a flicker of pride in their eyes. My father let out a light chuckle. "She's clever, sure," he said casually, "but Ashley, she's saving lives every day. That's the kind of pride that really matters." The words hit me like a script they'd rehearsed, like my whole life existed just to set up Ashley's grand performance, the hero, the healer, the one who mattered. Around the table, people went stiff. Eyes darted uncomfortably. One of my coworkers, bless her, tried to smooth things over. She leaned toward my mother gently. "Still, you must be very proud of Claire. What she's done is incredible." My mother's smile was cool, almost dismissive. "I suppose it's fine," she said. Then my father jumped back in, steering the conversation once again to Ashley's endless night shifts, her rotations, all the patients she'd helped. "Compared to a doctor," he added with a casual shrug, "an MBA doesn't quite measure up." That was it. That was the breaking point. I pushed back my chair. The sound cut through the room like a knife. Every conversation stopped. My voice came out steady, stronger than I expected. "Do you have any idea what it took for me to get here?" I said. "How many nights I went without sleep? How many hours I worked while studying so I wouldn't cost you a cent. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line. My father looked at me like I was making a scene. I paid Ashley's tuition, I continued. I sent money when the power was about to get cut off. I went without so this family could survive. And still, you dismiss me as just the girl behind a desk. The air in the room grew thick. Every breath seemed to stop. I wasn't speaking to the guests anymore, only to the two people who had never truly seen me. If I'm as useless as you think, I said quietly, then who do you think kept this family from falling apart all these years? My father stood up. His face flushed with anger. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His words were sharp enough to cut. We wish we never had a daughter like you. A collective gasp. The sound of a spoon hitting a plate. For a moment, my vision swam. Not from tears. From sudden, painful clarity. I looked around the table. Saw every shocked face. Every person who valued me for what I'd achieved. And then I looked back at the two people who had just erased me in an instant. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm, almost steady. If that's truly what you wish, I said, then maybe it's time I start living like I never belonged to you at all. And I left. Before I continue with what happened next, I want to pause for just a moment. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever been dismissed for achievements that should have been celebrated, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from, what city, what country, and if you've ever had to choose between staying silent or finally standing up for yourself, share that too, because this story is about to show you what happens when you finally choose yourself. Now let me tell you what came next. I didn't cry that night. Not when I walked out of the restaurant, not when my heels echoed on the wet Seattle pavement beneath a soft drizzle. Not even when I got home, slipped off my shoes, and sat in the quiet darkness of my apartment. But the next morning, when I unlocked my phone and saw 11 missed calls from my parents and a single text message that said, "You embarrassed us. I hope you're proud of yourself," that's when something inside me gave way. It wasn't sadness that hit me. It was exhaustion, because this wasn't some isolated moment. It was just the latest scene in a lifelong pattern I'd finally stopped pretending was normal. I wasn't surprised anymore. I was simply done. All through my childhood, I was the quiet girl who faded into the background while Ashley sparkled under every spotlight. We were only 2 years apart, yet it often felt like decades of distance in how we were loved. Ashley had piano recital, ribbons for participation, birthday parties with towering cakes and golden balloons spelling out her name. I once got a cake that read, "Happy Birthday, Ashley O. and Claire," scrolled awkwardly in the corner, a punchline that became a family favorite. They laughed. I didn't, but I smiled like I always did. I learned young that success only counted if it matched what they valued. When I brought home the first place certificate from the regional math competition, glowing with pride, I truly thought it might finally mean something. Mom didn't even glance up from the laundry basket. "That's nice," she said casually. But Ashley's volunteering at the hospital, that phrase real impact was their mantra. It echoed through every conversation, every comparison. Apparently, nothing truly mattered unless it came with a stethoscope. Still, I didn't quit. I kept pushing, believing that if I achieved enough one day, they'd finally say what I'd spent my whole life waiting to hear. "We're proud of you, Claire." So I kept grinding through college, juggling 3 jobs at once. I opened the coffee shop at dawn, scrubbed offices after evening classes, and spent weekends tutoring kids from the neighborhood. Every paycheck disappeared toward household bills, toward Ashley's medical textbooks, toward the family car that somehow only Ashley ever drove. I couldn't remember the last time I bought something for myself that wasn't on clearance. Meanwhile, Ashley cruised through undergrad, funded by scholarships and my support, and still found time to complain about the stress. One Thanksgiving, she rolled her eyes and muttered, "You don't understand what pressure is. You just work a desk job." I'd been managing a budget across 4 clients and training a new intern that week, but I said nothing. I never did. That was the unspoken rule. I was there to support, never to shine. By the time graduation approached, I had secured a position at a top-tier consulting firm in Seattle. A dream job, one I'd worked relentlessly to land. I knew this would be the moment, the achievement even my parents couldn't ignore. So I planned a dinner, a real celebration, the kind I'd only ever seen Ashley receive. I invited people who had supported me along the way, and reluctantly, I invited my parents and my sister. I didn't expect applause, not really, but I hoped they'd at least see me, just once. The dinner was supposed to mark the beginning of my new life. Instead, it became the moment I finally let go of theirs. After my father's cruel words, "We wish we never had a daughter like you," I left Delmonico's and walked out into the Seattle drizzle. My life didn't pause, it accelerated. For the first time in my life, I was done waiting for permission to exist. The days that followed were a blur of productivity. I threw myself into work with a clarity I'd never felt before. No distractions, no guilt trips, no frantic texts from my mother asking when I'd wire money for the utility bill. Just silence. And in that silence, I finally found space to breathe. At the consulting firm, I was assigned to a major project, restructuring operations for a tech company out of Redmond. High stakes, high visibility, exactly the kind of opportunity that would define a young consultant's trajectory. My manager handed it to me without hesitation. "You're ready for this," he said. "Don't look back." And I didn't. I led meetings with a confidence that surprised even me. I pushed back when clients tried to cut corners. I negotiated terms that made my team look brilliant and saved the company millions. People listened when I spoke. They respected me. For the first time, I realized what it felt like to be valued not because of what I sacrificed, but because of what I brought to the table. At home, I started rebuilding. I moved into a new apartment. Nothing extravagant, but it was mine. No shared bills. No guilt when I bought fresh flowers or left the lights on late while reading. No one to answer to. I hung art on the walls, not because it was practical, but because it made me happy. I cooked elaborate dinners just for myself and didn't feel wasteful. I let myself exist without justification. One evening, I sat on my new gray couch, a glass of wine in hand, staring out at the Seattle skyline. The city lights glittered like tiny stars, and for the first time in years, I felt whole. Not because I'd achieved something monumental, but because I'd stopped giving pieces of myself away to people who never valued them in the first place. That's when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Ashley. We need to talk." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I set the phone down and took another sip of wine. She could wait. They all could. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't running to fix anyone else's problems. I was building a life where I didn't need fixing. A few days later, Ashley showed up at my apartment unannounced. I opened the door and found her standing there, arms crossed, looking uncomfortable. "Can I come in?" she asked. I hesitated. Then I stepped aside and let her in. She walked into my living room, glancing around at the furniture, the art, the carefully chosen details. "Nice place," she said, though it didn't sound like a compliment. I didn't respond, just waited. She sighed heavily, like this conversation was already exhausting her. "Look, Claire, Mom and Dad are upset. They think you overreacted at the dinner. They want you to apologize." I almost laughed. The absurdity of it was almost funny. "Apologize?" I repeated. "Yes," she said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "You made a scene. You embarrassed them in front of all those people, important people, your professors, your boss." "They told me they wished they never had a daughter like me," I said flatly. "And you think I should apologize?" Ashley shifted her weight uncomfortably. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "They didn't mean it like that. You know they didn't. They were just frustrated. You know how they are when they get emotional." Yes, I said quietly. I do know how they are. I know exactly how they are, and I'm done pretending it's okay. You're being dramatic, she said, her tone sharpening, the same tone she'd used when we were kids, and I dared to complain about anything. We're a family. Families fight. You can't just walk away from family. Watch me, I said. The words came out calm, final. Ashley's face hardened. Her jaw tightened the way moms always did when she was angry. You're really going to throw away everything over one bad night? Over some words said in the heat of the moment? One bad night? I repeated, my voice rising despite my best efforts to stay calm. Ashley, it wasn't one night. It was every night. Every birthday where my cake was an afterthought. Every achievement I earned that somehow became about you. Every dollar I sent home that you spent without a second thought. Every time I was told I didn't matter because I wasn't saving lives like you. She flinched. Actually flinched, like I'd slapped her. That's not fair, Claire. Isn't it? I asked. I could feel 27 years of silence breaking open inside me. When was the last time you thanked me for paying your tuition, for covering the bills when you couldn't, for keeping this family afloat while you got to play the hero? I didn't ask you to do that, she snapped. Her voice was defensive now, sharp. No, I said, you didn't, but you took it anyway. And so did they. And none of you ever once asked if I was okay, if I needed help, if I was drowning while keeping everyone else above water. Silence, heavy and thick. Ashley looked away, staring at the window at the Seattle skyline beyond. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I didn't know it was that bad. You didn't want to know, I said. The truth of it settled between us like a stone. Because if you knew, you'd have to feel guilty, and guilt doesn't fit into the perfect image you've built for yourself. She stood up abruptly, her hands trembling slightly. So what now? You're just going to cut us all off, pretend we don't exist? No, I said. I'm going to live my life, build my career, surround myself with people who actually value me. And you're going to live yours. But I'm done being the one who holds everything together while getting nothing in return. Ashley walked to the door, paused with her hand on the handle, looked back at me one more time. You're going to regret this, she said. Her voice was cold, certain. Maybe, I said, but at least I'll regret it on my own terms. And then she left. The door closed with a soft click, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. Not sadness, not anger, just pure, clean relief. Like I'd been holding my breath for 27 years and finally let it out. The weeks turned into months. My parents tried calling, left voicemails that evolved from angry to guilt-trippy to outright manipulative. We gave you everything, my mother said in one message, her voice dripping with wounded martyrdom. We sacrificed for you, and this is how you repay us? I listened to that voicemail exactly once. Then I archived it. I didn't block them. I didn't respond. I just let the calls go unanswered and the messages pile up unread, because I'd learned something important in those quiet months. Silence wasn't surrender. It was self-preservation. It was choosing peace over proving a point. At work, I continued to rise. The Redmond project was a massive success that exceeded every projection. The client renewed their contract and doubled their investment. My name was mentioned in company-wide emails, praised in meetings. I was promoted to senior consultant within 6 months, the youngest person in the Seattle office to reach that level. My manager called me into his office one afternoon. "Claire," he said, leaning back in his chair with a satisfied smile. "I don't say this often, but you're exceptional, not just at the work, but at how you lead, how you handle pressure. The team respects you." I nodded, trying to absorb the compliment without deflecting it the way I always used to. "Thank you. That means a lot." "I'm putting you up for partner track," he continued. "It's early in your career, but you've earned it. You've more than earned it." Partner track. At 27. The kind of opportunity I dreamed about but never thought would come this soon. I don't know what to say, I admitted. Say yes, he said simply. Say yes and keep doing what you're doing. So I did. One day, a local business magazine reached out. They were featuring rising young professionals in Seattle and wanted to interview me. I almost said no. The idea of being visible, of putting myself out there, still felt uncomfortable. But then I thought about that dinner at Delmonico's, about being dismissed and diminished and told I didn't matter, and I thought, no more hiding. During the interview, I was honest, brutally, uncomfortably honest. I talked about the project's success, yes, but I also talked about what it took to get there, about working 3 jobs in college while my family took my paychecks for granted, about supporting people who never supported me back, about learning to value myself when no one else would, about finally walking away from toxicity disguised as family. The interviewer, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes, leaned forward. "That's incredibly brave," she said softly. "Do you have any regrets?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. "No," I said finally. "I regret staying silent for so long, but I don't regret leaving." The article was published 2 weeks later with the title, "Rising Star, Claire Adams on Leading Through Resilience." Within hours, it went viral. The magazine's website crashed from traffic. My LinkedIn exploded with connection requests. Within days, my inbox was flooded with messages from complete strangers. People telling me my story felt like their own. People confessing they cried reading it. One woman wrote, "I've been making excuses for my family's treatment for 15 years. Your story gave me permission to stop." Another said, "I thought I was the only one who felt invisible in my own family. Thank you for making me feel less alone." One line from the interview kept getting shared over and over, screenshotted and reposted across social media. "You don't have to earn love from people who use it as a weapon." Michael texted me a screenshot of it trending on Twitter. "Claire, you started a revolution. How does it feel?" I stared at my phone, reading message after message from people I'd never met, people finding courage in my story. "It feels," I typed back slowly, "like I finally said something that mattered." But not everyone was pleased. My parents' emails started coming fast and furious, angry, accusatory, dripping with wounded pride. "You've humiliated this family," my mother wrote. "How dare you speak about us in public like this, after everything we've done for you, after everything we've given you?" My father's message was shorter but sharper. "You've made your choice, Claire. Live with it." Ashley sent a text. "Nice article. Hope the attention was worth losing your family over." I read them all, every single one, and then I closed my laptop and poured myself a glass of wine. I didn't respond. I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain or justify or try to repair what they had broken. I just let it be. Let them be angry. Let them stew in their own narrative, where I was the villain and they were the victims. Because for the first time in my life, I understood something fundamental. I wasn't responsible for managing their emotions. I wasn't responsible for protecting them from the consequences of their own actions. I was only responsible for myself, and that was enough. Months passed. The article's viral moment faded, but the impact didn't. I started getting speaking invitations, HR departments wanting me to talk about resilience and self-worth, universities asking me to speak to graduating students about navigating toxic family dynamics. I said yes to some, no to others, on my own terms, always on my own terms. At one speaking event at a women's leadership conference, a young woman approached me afterward. She couldn't have been more than 22. "I needed to thank you," she said, her eyes wet with tears. "I've been making myself small for my family my whole life. Always the backup, always the one who gives. Your story made me realize I deserve better." I hugged her. This stranger who somehow felt like a sister. "You do deserve better," I whispered, "and you're strong enough to claim it." As she walked away, I felt something shift inside me. The pain of my family's rejection, the anger, the hurt, all of it was transforming into something else, something useful, something that could help others. That night, alone in my apartment, I pulled out my laptop and started writing. Not for a magazine this time, for myself, for anyone who needed to hear it. I wrote about growing up invisible, about sacrificing myself on the altar of family obligation, about the moment I finally chose myself, about what it cost and what it gave back. The words poured out of me like a river that had been dammed too long. And when I finished, 3 hours later, I had the rough draft of something, a memoir maybe, or just my truth, finally told without apology. One evening, I stood by my floor-to-ceiling window, a glass of wine in hand, watching the Seattle skyline glitter like it was quietly cheering me on. The city lights stretched out before me, each one representing a life, a story, a struggle. I thought about that younger version of myself, the girl who used to send half her paycheck home and wait for gratitude that never came. The girl who convinced herself that if she just did more, was more, gave more, they'd finally see her. I remembered that dinner at Delmonico's, the celebration that became a funeral for a relationship that was already dead. That single cruel sentence, "We wish we never had a daughter like you." And I realized something. I used to believe those words had power, that they could define me, destroy me. But standing here now, in this apartment I chose, in this life I built, with work I loved and people who genuinely cared about me, I understood the truth. Those words had no power. They never did. They were just the final permission I needed to let go, to stop waiting for love from people who were incapable of giving it, to stop shrinking myself to fit into their narrow vision of who I should be. I used to believe silence meant surrender. Now I understood. Silence could be strength. The strongest thing I ever did was stop fighting for people who refused to fight for me. The celebration I threw wasn't extravagant. It was small on purpose. No upscale venue, no obligatory guest list filled with names I barely recognized. Just a handful of close friends and colleagues who'd stood by me when everything fell apart. And Michael, naturally, who arrived with 2 bottles of wine and an absurdly large cheese board. He insisted on arranging himself like it was fine art. "This is the centerpiece," he announced seriously. "The brie is the focal point. The crackers provide texture. The grapes are for color contrast." I laughed. A real, genuine laugh that came from somewhere deep and free. "You're ridiculous. And you love me for it," he said, grinning. The truth was, I did. It wasn't a party for achievement, though I had plenty to celebrate. I'd just signed a leadership contract with the firm, not something handed to me or influenced by family connections. A position I'd earned and negotiated entirely on my own. No one else's shadow over it. No strings attached. It was a toast to survival, to building something from nothing, to choosing yourself when everyone else expects you to choose them. The apartment glowed with warm amber light. Soft jazz played in the background, mixing with laughter and easy conversation. Beyond the windows, Puget Sound shimmered under the night sky, the city pulsing gently like a heartbeat. Someone raised a glass in my honor, and I laughed again. Not the practiced, polite sound I'd once used to fill uncomfortable silences, but a genuine, unrestrained laugh. The kind that feels like breathing again after being underwater too long. No one brought up Ashley. No one mentioned my parents. No one gave me that sympathetic look I'd grown tired of. What I saw instead was pride, respect, and something softer, something that finally felt like love, the real kind, the kind you don't have to earn. Michael tapped his glass against mine, the crystal ringing clear in the warm room. "Look around you," he said, gesturing toward the laughter and light filling every corner. "This is the family you built, Claire." I nodded, the truth of it sinking deep into my bones. "Yeah," I said quietly, "the kind that chose me, too." Later, when everyone had gone home and the apartment was quiet again, I stepped out onto the balcony. The air from the bay was cool and clean, brushing through my hair like it was washing away whatever was left of the past. Below me, Seattle's lights shimmered like scattered stars, endless, beautiful, full of possibility. I finished the last sip of my wine and just breathed. Let the city's sounds wash over me. Car horns in the distance, the faint hum of traffic, the cry of a seagull somewhere over the water, normal sounds, peaceful sounds. I thought about all the years I'd spent invisible, the sacrifices no one noticed, the bills I paid while going without, the achievements dismissed with a shrug. I thought about that dinner, those words I'd never unhear, the moment everything shattered. But then I remembered other moments too. The first time I stood up for myself, the first night I slept in this apartment, alone but finally safe. The first time someone told me they were proud of me, and actually meant it. The article that helped strangers find their own courage. The speaking engagements where young women thanked me with tears in their eyes. All the moments that proved I was worth more than my family ever saw. And it hit me with the force of truth that can't be denied. Maybe we don't get to choose the family we're born into, but we absolutely get to choose which parts of that story we carry forward and which parts we finally, mercifully set down. Maybe love that demands constant proof isn't love at all. It's control wearing love's mask. And maybe real freedom isn't about getting them to finally see your worth. It's about seeing it yourself and refusing to accept anything less. From inside my apartment, my phone buzzed. Another message from someone I didn't know. Another stranger who'd read the article, found me through the digital noise, and needed to share their story. "Your words gave me permission to leave," they wrote. "I didn't know I needed permission until I read them. Thank you for being brave enough to share your truth. It helped me find mine." I smiled, set down my wine glass, went back inside to respond. Because this, I realized, was the gift hidden inside all that pain. My story, the one I'd been ashamed of for so long, was helping others write their own endings. And that mattered. That meant something. I wasn't alone anymore, and neither were they. I stepped back inside and turned off the lights one by one. The apartment settled into comfortable darkness, but it wasn't empty. The room still held the warmth of laughter, the faint scent of wine and good food, the echo of real connection, of chosen family. I'd spent 27 years begging for acknowledgement from people determined not to give it. Now I was done begging, done explaining, done shrinking. I was creating, building, choosing. And for the first time in my entire life, I knew exactly who I was. Not the daughter who needed to be managed or corrected, not a fallback plan for when the golden child needed help, not the invisible thread holding a dysfunctional family together. Just me, Claire Adams, 27 years old, Stanford MBA, senior consultant on Partner Track, rising leader, person who helps strangers find courage, woman who finally chose herself, whole, free, enough. I may not be the daughter they wanted, but I am, at last, completely and unapologetically myself. And that is more than enough.